This is Lucas Aaron, and tonight in this video, we will be talking about volume pressure strikers in the UFC. In my opinion, some of the best fights and some of the best fighters to watch inside the UFC are the volume and pressure fighters. You got the grapplers, which, kind of boring, especially recently. You got the power punchers like Ilia Topuria, like the Francis Ngannous, like the Tom Aspinalls, like these guys. And then you got the volume strikers, guys that will go in there with great cardio. They don't have extreme power, but they have good cardio. They can take damage, and they will just chip away at you until you drown in that octagon. They're not explosive. They're not trying to kill you with every strike, but they're just gonna chip away at you. And so some of the greatest fighters to watch inside the UFC, and my number one spot is not going to surprise anybody or confuse anybody. It is Max Holloway. Max, he is the greatest volume striker in MMA history. Statistically, he's the greatest. He's got the highest number of total strikes landed in UFC history at 3,655 significant strikes. And I believe he's more than 1,000 away from the number 2 spot. He's just the greatest volume striker. Insane cardio. He's given us some of the greatest fights. Arguably, he's given us the greatest moment in UFC history in that Justin Gaethje fight. I believe that that's the greatest moment that I've ever seen. Had me on my feet, had the whole room on its feet. Max Holloway, what a fighter. On January 16th of 2021, Max landed 445 significant strikes. He landed 445, not attempted. He landed 445 significant strikes against Calvin Kattar over 5 rounds. In that single fight, this is a funny stat, Max landed more than Tai Tuivasa and Sergey Spivak have in their entire UFC careers. Another good fight is this fight against Brian Ortega, which took place in, I believe, 2018. In that fight, he landed 290 significant strikes out of 490 strikes attempted. In one of the most dominant rounds of all time in that Ortega fight, which was round 4, that round holds the record for the most significant strikes landed in a single round in UFC history with 134 strikes. That round, honestly, is probably the greatest round of not only Max Holloway's career, but that might be the most dominant round we've ever seen. I mean, statistically, it is the most dominant in brutal rounds we've ever seen. If I'm judging it, it's probably a 10-6 round, forget 10-8. That's a 10-6 round. The beating that he put on Ortega in that fight is just astronomical. What an amazing performance from Max Holloway. In his second fight against Jose Aldo, we saw one of the best examples of a volume striker drowning an explosive power striker. Aldo came out in the first and second round. He was blasting those heavy leg kicks. He was trying to throw those super explosive punches, trying to take Max's head off. But as the fight got longer, Max was landing at a higher rate, therefore causing Aldo to panic and try harder to take Max out. And against a guy like Max, if you don't land a punch and kill him and knock him out, you're in for a very, very long night, unless, of course, you are Alexander Volkanovski. But I don't want to think about that right now. And so back to this fight, Max ended up drowning Aldo in the third round in a beautiful performance. If you haven't recently, I really encourage you to go back and watch that fourth round. The way Max, he was taunting Aldo. He was taunting Aldo to throw because he knew that Aldo was gassing. And that's just one of the most entertaining rounds. Max brought it out of him. He brought it out of Aldo. He made him gas and he finished him in a great performance. The next fighter I want to talk about is Jiri Prochazka. This may come to a shock to some of you, but Jiri, and it's not even his volume, it's his pressure. He's got some of the best pressure striking in the UFC. And maybe best displayed in his last fight against Khalil Roundtree. Yuri's pressure and volume was on, full display in that fight. He dropped the first 2 rounds. If you had money on Yuri in that fight like me, you were sort of panicking by the end of the second round, thinking Khalil's about to win a decision. Yuri's never getting a title shot again. That his comeback is being stopped by Khalil. But in one of the most amazing rounds in recent memory, in that third round against Khalil, Yuri came out. He was putting crazy pressure on Khalil. He ended up breaking Khalil in that third round. Within I believe it was under 4 minutes. He went in there and took Khalil out. It was a beautiful round of fighting. Yuri's pressure was insane in that fight and in that third round. Another good example, although this fight didn't go as long, but his fight with Rakic at UFC 300 versus Alexander Rakic. And in the first round, Rakic looked like, the greatest light heavyweight on the planet at the time. He went out there, he dominated the first round, landed a lot of clean punches, a lot of clean leg kicks on Yuri, and it was looking dark for Yuri in that first round. So the first round ends, second round comes out. Rakic had a moment of success, I believe, with I believe it was an elbow. It kind of made Yuri sit down a bit, but then Yuri sat forward in his chair. He pulled his proverbial shorts up, as Poirier does. And Yuri ended up finishing Rakic in that second round after losing, sort of like the Khalil fight. He dropped the first round, but in the second, he came out and he finished Rakic in an amazing performance. Like I said, his pressure in these fights is insane. He's another one of these guys that if you don't knock him out, if you're not Alex Pereira and you don't have that one shot that kills people, if you're not Pereira, it's really hard to beat a Yuri Prochazka. You have to take him out or he's going to keep coming and more than likely eventually finish you in the later rounds. Another great fight in Yuri's career is his fight with Dominic Reyes. This is a Dominic Reyes that 2 fights previously had gone 5 rounds with John Jones. But in this fight against Yuri was in insane form in this fight. He absolutely abused Dominic Reyes inside that octagon. And, at times it was a back and forth. I remember Reyes actually rocking Yuri on multiple occasions. But ultimately, in the second round, Yuri, he landed that amazing spinning elbow, rendering Dominic Reyes completely unconscious, in I believe it was the KO of the year in 2021. In that fight, it's a beautiful example, a beautiful showcase of pressure and of just volume striking. And honestly, it is, like I said, it is more the pressure with Yuri Prochazka, and just his warrior spirit. I don't want to sound cringe. I don't want to sound like a nerd, but that dude is different. He's not like anybody else. He's really not like anybody else. He's like an ancient Viking was transported into modern day, and he's a fighter. He's now, granted, he might be a little autistic. He might be, I think he definitely is on that spectrum a bit. But he's different. He wins a fight, he loses a fight, then he locks himself in a shed for 3 days, no food, no water, to battle his demons. This guy is different. He's amazing. I love Yuri Prochazka. The next fighter we're going to talk about is Dustin Poirier. Now, Dustin, he's got a lot of knockouts on his record. He's got the power, but he's shown on many occasions that he's got the ability to go those 5 rounds. His cardio, and he's got the ability to throw some crazy volume. Now, this fight that I'm going to talk about is probably the reason he's on this list, but in his second fight against the volume GOAT himself, Max Holloway, Dustin was just 4 significant strikes away from outlanding Holloway. Holloway landed 181 out of 446 attempted, while Dustin landed just 178 out of 381 attempted. So Dustin had the better percentage compared to what he landed and what he threw. But being just over a 5-round fight, being just just 4 shy from outstriking Max Holloway is an extremely, extremely great feat. And he deserves to be on this list. Dustin outlanded Max to the head, 153 to 141. On the all-time list of significant strikes attempted in a single fight, this fight is number 3 on that list at 827 strikes attempted over 5 rounds. Dustin is number 5 on the career significant strikes landed list at 1,861 strikes. Another great fight by Dustin is that banger against Dan Hooker in 2020. That fight is widely considered to be one of the greatest fights of all time. To me, that was fight of the year in 2021. You know, you had the Figgy and Moreno fight. You had the Jędrzejczyk versus Zhang fight, which, I mean, greatest women's fight of all time. But watching Hooker versus Poirier in the Apex, those lightweights throw like they did and just butcher each other like they did, that was fight of the year in 2020 to me. That was an amazing fight. But in that fight, Dustin landed 153 significant strikes out of 231 attempted. An absolute dogfight that was. Then his fight against Justin Gaethje, their first fight in 2018. Another all-time great fight. Poirier landed 174 out of 351. And I believe, correct me in the comments if I'm wrong, that fight ended at the very beginning of the 4th round, where Dustin countered one of Gaethje's leg kicks with a big left hand, rocking Gaethje, and then Dustin ended up getting the finish. And Dustin is one of the top leaders in significant strikes landed over their careers in the UFC. And the final fighter that we're going to discuss in this video is Nick Diaz. And, you know, it's very sad. It's very sad. I know Nick Diaz's career was heavily damaged by the Nevada State Athletic Commission, you know, banning Nick, giving him a 5-year suspension for marijuana, for smoking marijuana. He tested positive for marijuana in the Anderson Silva fight, which, it's crazy. They gave him 5 years from 2015 to 2020. That is absolutely insane. But we still got to witness a lot of great fights in his career in the UFC and in Nick's fights in Strikeforce. Nick landed an overall 1,876 significant strikes, just over 10 more than Poirier over his career. At UFC 137, Diaz landed 178 significant strikes against BJ Penn. That was a great fight. This is one of the highest significant strikes numbers for a fight in the welterweight division's history. Another great fight is, you know, although it was outside of the UFC, Diaz landed 125 significant strikes in a single round against Scott Smith. If you haven't watched that fight, it's on YouTube. It's a great fight. And another great example of volume striker versus an explosive power puncher, Nick Diaz had one of the greatest 1-round fights against Paul Daly. This one is also all over YouTube. Look it up right now after watching my video. Go watch that fight. It's less than 5 minutes. It was an amazing, you know, beautiful fight, violent, back and forth, and it was a finish. You know, Nick, he implemented the volume and pace that he often did. He battled back from being dropped by Paul Daly, who had very, very strong power back in the day. And he eventually finished Daly at the end of the first round. And it really is sad to see what the Nevada State Athletic Commission did to Nick Diaz's career over some marijuana. You know, let's be honest, that's what it was. I don't know if they had a vendetta out against Nick. He was a very brash. He had some interesting moments. I remember the Strikeforce brawl. That's a very infamous moment in the career of Nick and Nate Diaz. You know, so he was very brash back in the day. You might even be able to say difficult, but he did not deserve a 5-year suspension for marijuana. You know, we got guys like John Jones out here popping for steroids. You know, they'll move an event for John Jones during fight week. They'll screw over their fans. They'll screw over all the people that traveled for John Jones. You know, that I believe that was 232 back in December of 2018. You know, they'll move an entire event for John Jones after he pops for steroids, but if Nick Diaz pops for marijuana, he gets that 5-year ban, which is insane. But you know, we did miss out on a lot of great fights due to his suspension. We missed out on a lot of great Nick Diaz volume striking due to the Nevada State Athletic Commission. So yeah, so overall, you know, volume strikers in MMA, they produce some of the greatest fights of all time. You know, it's really fun to see. It's really fun to see just a vicious knockout from time to time. But what I really love is seeing a professional fighter, a professional killer quit in there due to another man's volume and another man's cardio. It's some of the best fights, in my opinion. And, you know, I love these types of fights. If you disagree with me, if you agree with me, if you enjoyed the video, please like, please subscribe. I'm really trying to make it out of this town. I'm trying to make it out of the trenches. So please subscribe. I'd really appreciate it. And thank you for watching. And I'll see you on the next one.